Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. First up today, the story of Carrie, the kind of coworker everyone avoids. She screamed, threatened, bragged about her power, and even turned people's love lives into her personal battleground. But after picking the wrong target one too many times, she got a dose of instant karma. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. How the office bully finally found out. My wife has this entitled coworker, well, technically an acquaintance, and she runs in our wider friend circle, but we both try to keep our distance. We'll call her Carrie. Carrie is infamous at work for being a bully. She screams at coworkers, claims she can get people fired, she can't, and thrives on drama. Her go-to phrase when intimidating people is "F around and find out." That'll be important later. Now, Carrie has this buddy. Nothing serious, just a guy she hooks up with and tosses out whenever she's bored. She's also known for collecting engagement rings. Her pattern goes like this. She dates a guy, gets a ring, convinces him to pay off some bill, then dumps him. She treats relationships like Pokemon cards. Gotta catch 'em all. Anyway, her current buddy, let's call him Bill, was just one of her temporary flings. She used him, kicked him to the curb, and moved on. At the time, she was engaged to some other guy who'd just bought her a $6,000 ring and spent another $10,000 fixing her roof. So obviously she wasn't interested in Bill anymore. She was too busy bragging about her new catch. Then comes Mandy, another coworker of my wife's. I don't know her personally, but from what I've heard, she recently got out of a 15-year controlling marriage. She's been rebuilding her confidence and finding herself again. Mandy meets Bill. She has no idea he ever knew Carrie, let alone had a fling with her. They hit it off immediately. It's wholesome, it's genuine, and it turns into a real relationship built on respect and love. And when Carrie finds out, oh boy, she loses her mind. Keep in mind, she never dated Bill seriously, never loved him, and had already moved on with another man. But suddenly, in her head, Mandy had stolen her man. She told everyone who would listen, and plenty who didn't, how betrayed she was. At work, she started storming into the boss's office daily, demanding, "Why does that little bee still work here?" She'd yell it on the work floor, too. She even screamed at Mandy for a full hour one day over something she hadn't done. Outside work, it got worse. Carrie started harassing Mandy and Bill around town, shouting insults at them in public, calling Mandy every name imaginable. B, slut, C, all screamed loud enough for strangers to stare. And every time she'd throw in her favorite line, "She's effing around and she's gonna find out." 2 months later, Mandy and Bill are still together and happier than ever. Carrie, meanwhile, has already broken off her engagement. Shocking, I know. And somehow managed to get engaged again, then married, in a week. Fast forward to the anniversary of a mutual friend's passing. Everyone from their workplace is going out to have a drink in the friend's memory. Carrie, who wasn't even that close to the deceased, takes a week off to mourn, which in her case means an excuse to drink nonstop. So everyone's at the bar, and after 2 days of heavy drinking, Carrie spots Mandy. Instantly, she starts in on her again, shouting, calling her names, throwing out the same tired insults. Mandy, finally fed up after months of harassment, tries to talk to her. She actually wants to make peace, but Carrie isn't having it. She sneers, calls Mandy a C again, and repeats that same threat. "You effed around, and you're about to find out." And oh, she found out. Mandy snapped. She grabbed a beer bottle and threw it, dead center, right in Carrie's face. Picture the cop in The Big Lebowski throwing the coffee mug. Carrie went down like a sack of bricks. There was silence for a moment before someone at the bar, no one knows who, said, "Looks like you're the one who effed around and found out." Carrie, humiliated and stunned, got up and left. The next day, she showed up to work with a massive black eye, telling anyone who would listen that she was the victim. Problem is, everyone had seen her bullying Mandy for months. No one bought it. And that's where things stand. Mandy and Bill are still going strong. Carrie's on her 5th engagement, I think, and still trying to play the victim. If anything new happens, trust me, I'll have popcorn ready. I wouldn't want to work at a place that lets this B-word flinger crap around at other employees like that. People in charge must be totally useless. This is like a high school cafeteria in the 1980s. Damn. That being said, if it was on like Donkey Kong and I was there, I'd be bringing that crap up to this bee like every week. Hey, remember when you got knocked the F out with that beer bottle? Remember? And our second story. A stranger's smug grin cost him a dented door. I was loaded down with groceries, arms full of bags, trudging toward my car in the store lot when some idiot pulls up right next to me and swings his door wide open, full force, right into my driver's side. I froze for a second because who expects a car door to face your car in a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon? Hey, you just hit my car, I said, more incredulous than angry. He didn't even look embarrassed. He turned, grinned like he'd won something and said, loud enough for the whole row to hear, "Just hit my car and we're even, okay?" Then he walked away as if he'd offered me gum. There was a security guard standing by the entrance watching the whole thing. I caught his eye and asked if he'd seen it. He nodded, flat, uninterested, and walked off. Like he'd seen this exact entitlement a dozen times that day. That shrug was the last polite thing that happened. Adrenaline kicked in hard. I could feel my face flush, the grocery bag suddenly heavier. For a half second, I pictured a normal response. Find him, exchange info, call it in. But the way he said it, so casual and smug, set off something in me that wasn't reasonable. I stepped forward, planted my foot, and kicked his driver's door with a hard, clean shove. The metal folded inward with a satisfying thunk and a long, ugly crease. He looked back stunned, like his audacity had met a physical reply it hadn't budgeted for. I didn't get into a conversation. I didn't wait for regret or apology. I shoved my bags into the trunk, climbed in, closed the door, and drove away. Later, I thought about how wild that felt, how quickly a small, stupid moment could blow up into something messy. No ticket, no security follow-up, no calls, just a dented door, a busted ego, and me wondering whether I'd handled it like the person I wanted to be or like the fury of the moment. The kick wasn't a calculated response, it was a language shift. When words and social contracts failed, his smirk, the guard shrug, you communicated in the only way that felt proportionate in that charged second. A physical answer to a physical insult. And our next story. Quiet hours end at 6. And so begins the aria. I, 28-year-old female, have lived in my apartment for about 2 years now, and until recently, everything was perfect. Quiet building, good neighbors, no drama. I have a small morning ritual that starts my day. I get up around 7:30 a.m., feed my cat, grind some fresh coffee beans, and make breakfast before work. The grinder runs for maybe 30 seconds. It's not exactly a jackhammer. For nearly 2 years, not a single person had a problem with it. Then about 4 months ago, a new tenant moved into the unit next door. Mid-40s, cranky looking, the kind of guy who probably sighs loudly when teenagers laugh in public. Apparently he works nights, which fine, people have different schedules. But instead of introducing himself or asking politely if I could be mindful in the mornings, he started with passive-aggressive notes under my door. The first one said in all caps, "Some people are trying to sleep." The second was more specific. "The coffee grinder is excessive." By the third note, he'd fully committed to being that guy. "This is your final warning. Filed a complaint with the landlord." The landlord, bless him, laughed when I showed him the notes. 7:30 in the morning? That's not even close to a noise violation, he said. Ignore him. So I did. Until my charming neighbor decided to escalate. Every time I turned on a kitchen appliance, he'd bang on the wall. Blender, bang, bang, bang. Microwave beeps, bang, 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 bang. Even using my electric kettle would set him off. It was like living next to an angry drum solo. I tried to be reasonable. I even wrote him a note of my own saying I understood his schedule and would keep things brief and considerate. He responded by taping a note to my door that said quiet hours should apply to everyone. That's when I decided, fine, if he wants a noise war, I'll win it. Here's the thing. I took opera lessons in college. I hadn't sung in a while, but I still had my range, and our building's quiet hours end at 6 a.m. So the next morning, I set my alarm for 5:55, made myself a cup of tea, and at exactly 6 a.m., I began practicing vocal warm-ups, loudly. I started with simple scales, then some arias. The acoustics in my kitchen were surprisingly good. By the time I hit the Queen of the Night aria from the Magic Flute, I was laughing between breaths. Sure enough, within days, there was a pounding on my door. I opened it mid-aria, still holding a high note. My neighbor stood there, face red, veins bulging, yelling something about psychotic noise harassment. I stopped singing, smiled sweetly, and said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you could hear me. I'm just pursuing my passion. Music is meant to be shared, you know?" He threatened to file another complaint. I said, "Go ahead," and he did. The landlord called me later that afternoon, barely containing his amusement. "He's saying you're performing operas?" "Practicing," I corrected, "during permitted hours." He sighed, "Completely legal, just try to keep it under stadium volume, okay?" "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't want to disturb anyone." That was 3 weeks ago. I still sing every morning, sometimes Puccini, sometimes Verdi. Last week, I started working through Wagner. Those songs are long. I make sure to finish before 7:30, right when my coffee grinder comes out. He stopped pounding the walls. Maybe he's finally given up, or maybe he's sleeping with noise-canceling headphones now. Either way, peace has been restored. For me, anyway. Petty? Absolutely. But after months of being treated like a criminal for grinding coffee beans, I feel zero guilt. My mornings are brighter, my vocals are improving, and if my neighbor happens to wake up to the sound of me belting Italian arias at sunrise, well, he should have thought twice before declaring war on caffeine. And honestly, nothing hits quite like that first sip of coffee after nailing a high C. That's odd, he can even hear your microwave beeping. What kind of apartments are these? I can't hear a thing from my neighbors. The walls must be paper thin. Either that or he has Superman hearing, which in that case I'd suggest for him to find a place out in the country to live in. And our last story. He used a chain to rip out mailboxes. My dad's trap sent him to federal prison. This happened way back in the mid-90s, but every time I tell it, I still grin like an idiot. We used to live out in the sticks, a log cabin on 10 acres about 10 minutes from town. The kind of place where people greeted each other with tractor waves and the soundtrack occasionally included banjo. Our driveway was almost a quarter-mile long and came out onto a 2-lane state highway. Quiet, pretty, and perfect for a kid who liked playing outside. One Monday morning, I trudged down to the mailbox after the bus dropped me off, and nothing. The post was gone. The box was gone. The whole setup looked like someone had yanked it straight out of the ground. Dad wasn't thrilled. He stomped down the drive, checked the neighbors, and swung by the sheriff's house a mile down the road. The sheriff took one look and said, "Yup, been happening up and down this stretch. Someone's driving down at night like it's a sport. Toss a chain over the posts, gun it, rip the damn things out." Folks had tried everything, deeper posts, thicker timber. Half the neighborhood had started building uglier mailboxes on purpose just to lure the idiot. The sheriff had a suspect, a local guy with a massive lifted truck, but nothing solid enough to prosecute. The mailbox thief treated it like a game. Sat up and take down every weekend. Dad listened, then went home and did what Dad does when annoyed. He engineered a solution. A little background. Dad's a big man, steelworker, engineering brain. Hands like hams. He doesn't shout much, he plans. He marched into the hardware store and bought the fanciest mailbox they had, the one with the little flag and the polished look, then bought an 8-foot length of 3-inch hardened tool steel. He dug a hole like a man and a half, dropped the steel into the earth, set it vertical, and filled the hole with quick-set concrete. To make it look normal, he wrapped strips of wood around the steel like a post, primed and painted it, had Mom plant some flowers at the base, and slapped the mailbox on top so it looked like a regular tempting target. We called it the Mailbox of Doom. Dad wanted the thief to think, "Sweet, jackpot," then discovered they'd tried to tow a piece of industrial equipment off the property. Sure enough, not even a week later, I went out for the bus, and there it was. The mailbox, exactly where it should be, with something attached to it that made the whole family laugh until we were crying. 30 feet of chain and a proper hitch assembly were wound through the box like a sacrificial offering to stupidity. The chain had sheared the bolts and come clean off some truck frame. Whoever tried to yank it out left the hitch behind like a calling card. Dad called the sheriff. The deputy came out and took one look, then just died laughing. He drove over to the suspect's place, did a bit of sleuthing, and, oh boy, the damage to the truck's frame matched the hitch left on our mailbox. Suddenly, our little prank had legal teeth. The deputy said, "You do know tampering with the mail is a federal offense, right?" and we all nodded like the class that had just learned something useful for once. The sheriff didn't cuff anyone that day, not right away, but the guy's truck got inspected and he had some explaining to do. Word spread. 2 days later, the county prosecutor called, and shortly after that, our suspect was paying more attention to his driveway than to late-night heroics. The reward came in the form of a cooler of beer and a big bag of venison. Unofficial sheriff's thank yous for being clever instead of just angry. The deputies kept stopping by for coffee for a week. People on our road started waving more often. The thief, he stopped leaving hitch assemblies behind. I don't know whether he got a polite federal nudge or the humiliation of having half the county laugh at him, but he disappeared from our little saga. Best part, the mailbox looked exactly the same afterward, like nothing had ever happened. The paint job hid the steal like Dad planned. Mom planted more flowers. The sheriff tipped his hat every time he drove by. And for years afterward, whenever some kid on the road got an idea about ripping out mailboxes, someone's dad would say, "You remember the mailbox of doom? Don't." People asked if Dad was proud. He shrugged, smiled, and said, "Someone had to stop the idiot. Figured it might as well be permanent." He also added, sotto voce, "Plus, watching a hitch assembly dangling off your fence is better than a courtroom any day." You can nitpick the legality, you can say two wrongs don't make a right. But around our mailbox that winter, justice felt like a quiet, solid, stainless steel thump. And every time I drive past that stretch of highway now, I still picture that chain and the dumbfounded face of the guy who thought he could outdo a tool steel post. Smart move, dumb butt. The moment that chain snapped, that thief learned more about Newton's third law than any science class could have taught him. You can almost picture it. Midnight, headlights cutting through the dark, a smug grin behind the wheel, and then, bam! Instant regret as his truck lurches to a stop and the hitch stays behind like a tombstone for his pride. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.